Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. Tonight's episode is Why is ISIS a Rape Culture? I've written you a script. In the fall of 2014, a Saudi fighter for the Islamic State, ISIS, in Shaddadi, Syria, bought a female slave in the market, a 34-year-old Yazidi captive. He raped her over and over again. Why else do you buy a female slave? Then he purchased a second sex slave. This one was a 12-year-old girl. And suddenly the handcuffs of the Saudi fighter's lust came off. Said the 34-year-old after she escaped, the bold ISIS fighter raped the 12-year-old youngster, quote, for days on end despite heavy bleeding. The 34-year-old, the older sex slave, says with a mixture of despair and disgust, he destroyed the 12-year-old's body. She was badly infected. The fighter kept coming and asking me, why does she smell so bad? And I said, she has an infection on the inside. You need to take care of her. Pleaded the 34-year-old, she's just a little girl. And the fighter answered, no, she's not a little girl. She's a slave. And she knows exactly how to have sex. Then he added something vital. And having sex with her pleases God. So the fighter never provided medical care. Instead, he prostrated himself on the floor, prayed to Allah, then mounted the child over and over again. Each time, when he was finished, he laid himself out on the floor again, and he prayed. Another escapee from ISIS sexual slavery, a 15-year-old, recalls that her rapist said something revealing. He said that raping me is his prayer to God. I said to him, what you're doing to me is wrong and it will not bring you closer to God. And he said, no, it's allowed. It's halal. Another 15-year-old who became the possession of an ISIS fighter in his 20s said, he kept telling me this is ibadah, meaning that having sex with an unwilling non-Muslim is a form of worship. In ISIS' statement about the Blessed Paris invasion on the French Crusaders, which is ISIS' statement of responsibility for the Paris attacks of November 13th, 2015, ISIS calls Paris, quote, the capital of prostitution and obscenity, close quote. And ISIS calls a concert at the Bataclan Conference Center an event where, quote, hundreds of apostates had gathered in a profligate prostitution party. When ISIS sexual mores are so in love with rape, how in the world dare ISIS call the sexuality of the West prostitution? How dare it call Western sexuality profligate? Easy. Groups of humans have been making rules about sexuality since human culture began, since sometime between 2.5 million and 32,000 years ago. In Islam, you can have 4 wives at a time and as many concubines, as many sex slaves as you can afford. What's more, you can divorce an old wife and marry a new one. So even the number of your wives is limited only by your wallet or by the number of people you can kill. Ibn Saud, a deeply religious ruler who founded modern Saudi Arabia in 1932 by killing, had 22 declared wives and so many concubines that his doctor said he had roughly 300 women in total. ISIS is convinced that the sexual mores of the West are sinful, while its ways are blessed, and it concludes this for a simple reason. Groups use ideas, they use culture, they use manners and mores as badges of group identity. Groups imprint children on ideas of sexual right and wrong and make those kids fiercely resistant to other ways of doing things. Kids at roughly 2.5 to 3 years old start showing disgust at things that are bad and approval of things that are good. Culture, the repository of our ideas of good and bad, stamps arbitrary ideas into these highly judgmental toddlers. Ideas of good and bad. Why? Again, those ideas are badges of group identity. The more kids who are indoctrinated in our ideas of sexual good and evil, the bigger our group will get, and the more powerful. Look, my book, The Lucifer Principle, my first book, shows how groups compete for position in a pecking order of groups. And that competition is often vicious. That's what ISIS and militant Islam are doing today. They are competing with Western culture and competing with Chinese culture for the top slot in a global pecking order. A slot the militant jihadists are convinced that God himself will give them if they kill hard enough and if they rape hard enough. But there's a method to this madness. Different sexual mores lead to something that is not at all arbitrary. Different sexual mores lead to different sexual strategies. In Judaism, you are a Jew if your mother is a Jew. What happens if there's a pogrom and your mom is raped? Her child will be a Jew. This is the sexual strategy of a subordinate people. Islam is different. You are a Muslim if your father was a Muslim. You are an Arab if your father was an Arab. This is the sexual strategy of a culture of conquest. It is the sexual strategy of a rape culture. Why? By rape, you make more Muslims, whether the woman you've impregnated was willing or not. Or as the late Ali Mazrui, a Muslim professor of political science, African studies, and philosophy at SUNY Binghamton, State University of New York at Binghamton, said, "You can make jihad via sex. You can make war via sex. You can make a highly competitive form of jihad, a procreationally competitive form of jihad. You can wage war for Allah by making babies, whether the mother is willing or not. With this strategy," says Mazrui, "Islam can take over entire continents and more. The bigger the size of the Islamic population, the better its chances of winning jihadist Islam's ultimate prize, the world, the entire world, your world and mine. That's why a concert in Paris is a prostitution party, but raping a 12-year-old sex slave in the Islamic State is holy. The real God is not a figure in the sky. The real God is the group you belong to." This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make, or want to know why? Ask how. And now for the sleazy, slimy, seditious, sneaky, impossible to find little off button. I think I've got it.